Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bird in the Wings. I'm your host, Kelli Strickland. Today's interview is with Tarl Knight. Tarl is the co-proprietor of the Tarlton Theatre downtown with his business partner, Mark Mariucci. If you have never seen the inside of the Tarlton, it's really just this very cool little Art Deco space. It's an old building. I'm guessing it's from the 1930s, 20s, something like that. Formerly the historic West Theater, movie theater, which maybe some of you remember. And I have a conversation with Tarl about his trajectory as a singer-songwriter, about how he went about developing his toolbox as an artist, about some of his hopes for what the Tarlton can, or how the Tarlton can serve our community. For those of you who don't know, the Weidner has partnered with the Tarlton Theatre. We've begun presenting some programs down there. We started with the Green Bay Film Society, which started last month. And in about a month, maybe less than a month, couple of weeks by the time you're listening to this, we'll be announcing a full list of cool things that we're doing down there to help stimulate our local creative economy. So it's a cool building. Tarl is an interesting guy. And at one point, I reference a book. The book is How to Do Nothing. And in the conversation, I couldn't remember the name of the author. I want to be sure I credit that correctly. Her name is Jenny Odell. We say more about the book during this conversation. So thanks for listening, and here it is, my conversation with Tarl. All right. So when I was looking at, when I was Google stalking you, Tarl, that's what I was doing. I was Google stalking you and came across some of your music, gave it a listen, greatly enjoyed myself.
Thank you.
But I noticed on one of them, it identified you as being out of Sturgeon Bay. Mm-hmm. What, when, where are you from?
Well, originally from the East Coast. That's where I spent a number of years growing up. And then to Green Bay. My mother was from downtown Green Bay. Oh. And so I spent some time here. And
like as a kid growing up, you would come visit?
No, as a kid, I moved here and lived here.
How old?
I would say after 5, before 10, somewhere in there.
Grade school
age. And, so really got to know Green Bay at the downtown. Mm-hmm. And, got used to a small city, hometown kind of vibe. The water, you got the bridges.
Yeah.
And so after I graduated at the Interlochen Arts Academy in Traverse City, Michigan, which is, another small city. Mm-hmm. This campus is out in the woods, but the water, is beautiful and that kind of called to me. I decided to hitchhike around the Midwest.
Okay. How old are we talking now?
We're talking 18, 19 after I graduated. And for about a year, I just did that. I went over to Duluth and Minneapolis and Chicago and Peoria and Madison and Milwaukee.
You were like a rails hobo of the Great Lakes.
Definitely, with the knapsack on the stick and everything.
Yeah, and a can of beans.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there were cans of beans involved, Kelli. I had guitar and suitcase in hand, and I just kind of trekked around. I got to meet a lot of interesting folks. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about, their struggles and and really identified with a lot of friendly folks who were taking as much of a risk taking me to dinner or letting me stay at their place.
Yeah.
Inviting me into their homes and their families as I was, roaming around and getting in strange cars. But, something I did after that was I thought I'm going to drive down some roots here and I'm going to record some of this music. I'm going to get involved in a community and just stick it out. And so what I did is ended up at the Steelbridge Song Festival in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. And I got
What's that guy's name? Remind
Pat
me.
McDonald.
Pat McDonald,
yeah,
thank you.
And so I got to know Pat. And he kind of took me in like a son, and I was there at the Holiday Music Motel making music with him, writing music with a lot of folks there. Every festival, there's a very unique thing that this festival does.
Yep.
And they bring artists and musicians and songwriters, performers in from around the world and hold them up in this motel for a week. Everyone writes songs throughout the week together. It's a very La Vie Boheme environment. There's a lot of drink and there's a lot of, good food. People have a good time. But we get to share experiences and form bonds like that over the course of the week, writing different songs. We record them all together in our motel rooms. Very, avant-garde.
Yep.
Small kind of DIY setups. But it's so much fun. And at the end of the week, then we perform those songs in Sturgeon Bay downtown on 3rd Avenue at the 3rd Avenue Playhouse, the Tap. And all the folks from the city and the town come out, and Door County, they come and celebrate all of the original songs that were written that week. It's a very creative endeavor. It's, it's very unique. And so I got a lot of different icons kind of stuck in my head. They started to develop little seeds like theater in a downtown on a bay.
You're jumping ahead.
Okay.
You're jumping ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I want to go back to Interlaken for a second.
Sure.
All
I love Interlaken.
So were you there for 4 years of high school?
No, I was there for 1 year.
Okay.
I was there, I went to a different school every year, but as my grade school, middle school, high school education continued, it became clearer and clearer that I was not going to succeed. And this is to people around me too, who were there guiding me. I was not going to succeed in a conventional,
in a traditional K-12 environment.
Yeah, it was really bad for me. It was not healthy for me. I needed the ability to be creative. I needed the ability to, you're not old enough, to be fully independent, but you're old enough where you're already there. In a lot of ways. So I couldn't sit still. I couldn't, I had to dictate my own curriculum. There were negotiations that had to happen. And in the traditional sense, the traditional model, there's no negotiations allowed. But I needed those by then.
Right. Like what you're describing, I kind of, I'm interested in this kind of experience. And in fact, a lot of the folks who have sat in here and talked with me about their path to becoming an artist, identifying it as an artist, which is a whole other thing. Some of it, a lot of it has to do with, part of it's how we're wired, of course. And part of it is who's negotiating how we learn and how much autonomy we're given, how much we're sort of empowered to pursue things that we're passionate about. And what you're describing, I think, for me, is one of the greatest arguments for widespread arts education in our K-12 schools. Because we know for a fact, there's research upon research upon research that students who learn differently really benefit from arts education, right? And I think about kids like you're describing your young Tarl self, being told by classroom teachers well, you're failing because you're failing at this model that we've created, when in fact you could have enjoyed extraordinary success if given a different kind of curriculum or flexibility, curriculum based on expression and all of these things. So so who was it in your family that recognized that and was like, this kid's just not going to succeed in this kind of environment? Yeah,
it was my mother.
Yeah.
And I think she from a very early age was pushing arts, was pushing music.
Was she herself artistic, creative?
I think maybe early on.
Yeah.
By the time that I came into her life, I don't think that I saw that as much. Her priorities shifted to helping me to discover myself.
Yeah,
You know, she's that kind of mother
Yep.
where it was like, all right, that's done.
Yep.
Now we've got something new. And so, you know, all hands on deck there.
Well, one could argue that raising a child is an act of creative expression.
Yeah, well, trust me, it was a creative experience for all of us, you know. But she, you know, she was always there on the journey with me.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, museums and libraries and you know, lots of concerts and lots of galleries. She was that kind of mother. I was very lucky. I mean, so lucky. But she saw early on, and so we started switching schools and started to experiment. Now, not everybody has that kind of opportunity, but we did, and started to look at different options that way. Interlochen was the last kind of hope for me.
Yeah.
I was to a very serious point where I was truant all the time. I'd skipped 100 days of school. I was already checked out.
Yeah.
And I was not interested anymore in even a diploma. I really wasn't. I was writing songs since I was 13.
Yeah.
I had begun performing all around the downtown area in Green Bay, all around the state. And, you know, other kids were going home and doing homework, and I was going home and learning how to record and learning all these instruments and picking up the bass and the drums and the piano and the guitar. And I already knew that was where I was going. And I knew myself well enough to know I'd be able to be flexible and I'd be able to turn and pivot where I needed to. You know, and so I was convinced I didn't need a college diploma.
Yeah.
I didn't need a high school diploma.
Yeah.
You know, and there's some arrogance there because you never know. But, you know, I was really young. And, you know, but Interlochen was kind of the last attempt at creating an environment where there could be a negotiation, where I could come to the table and educators could come to the table and we could say, what does this unique experience look like? You know, and the arts, you know, involvement in that education really didn't come too late for me. I'm lucky. But I wanted to kind of highlight something you had mentioned earlier, which is, you know, the importance of arts in education is so integral because during education, people need outlets to be able to explore their identity and their future. And there's a lot of cut and dry information in a lot of education. The arts angle of education is definitely not that.
Yep.
It's very fluid. It's very nebulous. It gives people the opportunity to look into themselves.
Yep.
It's not just information. You know?
I would go one step further and say it's giving people, and this is not an art skill, this is a life skill, right? It's giving young people the opportunity to have the experience of trying and succeeding or trying and failing and trying again, right? Like the whole notion that there's no right answer, only you as the artist get to determine whether you've succeeded or failed.
Yeah.
You can take input from people and you can hear it or not hear it, right? And I think the more experience you have, maybe you get better at understanding what it is you need to be receiving in terms of input and criticism. And I mean that in the constructive sense, not in the journalistic sense. But although I don't even sure journalists, critics, do they exist anymore, or is it just people on Instagram being like, "This is what I think"? But nonetheless, I think that you're right. There is a lot about exploration of identity and giving expression to things we hold dear and to things that we find beauty and expression of emotions that feel complicated and overwhelming without those modes of expression. That's all important. But there's also just this importance of try something. And you can't be wrong, right? We'll give you some guardrails to try to be better and to give you more tools to make sure that you can express yourself as fully and clearly as you want.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's the thing. It's like arts programming is not about building that next generation of artists. That happens too, which is important. But it's about making whole human beings.
Yeah, the human experience.
Yeah.
You know, in the post-capitalist thing, you know, we're looking at, you know, advancing into a type of machinery, into like a model of living where we're efficient, where we're productive. You know, there's another angle there to creating a balanced human being, and that's the human experience. That's expression. That's the emotional, you know, the intellectual side, bridging those together.
Yeah.
And, you know, in creating a healthy society. And, you know,
have you
that's important.
Heard of or read this book called How to Do Nothing?
No, but I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
So I started it thinking it was going to be like a self-help book that just sort of was like my antidote to being brainwashed about productivity.
Yeah.
But to some extent it is. But what it really is this author, I mean, she's genius, and I'm going to have to put it in the intro when I record it because I can't think of it right now. But she really describes the act of rejecting efficiency and productivity, that's the currency of capitalism, right? That rejecting those things is a political act, and that the space that it opens up, yes, that is where you find inspiration, creative expression, curiosity, all of these things that are totally compulsory to a rich human experience. But the way she talks about it as sort of rejecting the economy of attention, that's her phrasing. You're going to dig this book. I can tell just by what you just said, you are going to dig this book.
I'm sure I will.
Okay, so let's go back to Interlaken. So that was the last. I mean, it was your last shot to get a high school degree.
It was, yeah. And what I learned there is that if you try and try and try again, you'll still almost fail, but you'll just hang on. And so that's what I did. I hung on, and there was an opportunity where I'd come to the table with all the kind of stars aligned there. There was a new program that Interlaken had just introduced. They have a lot of great majors and programs there for high school students. There are composition majors and motion picture majors and dance majors and in the music program. We have symphonic orchestra. This was the first year where there was introduced a composition major subset of singer-songwriting. So this was kind of like, all the stars aligned here. I went and I came to the table with most of the skills that were going to be covered. So what I was lucky in being able to do is, while students broke off to go and learn guitar or piano, having already discovered my skill sets with those, I was able to go and freely explore the organ building and break into the old storage room where they had the 300-year-old harpsichord and start to experiment with wine bottles and glasses filled with different amounts of water and conduct symphonies with that. And so I was really able to spread my wings creatively. Yeah. And that's where I started to learn a lot of things about myself and my peers. This was kind of my condensed college experience. There's a campus out in the middle of the woods with a lot of creative, artsy people. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of creative, artsy things that go down. This was a great opportunity for me to kind of get that out of my system and experience that. It went by, I mean, when I think of it, every day was like a year, but it really went by in what feels like a week now.
So you say get it out of your system. Yeah. And I find that so curious because I feel like people who've ever experienced a chapter of that in their lives spends the rest of their creative career chasing it. So like, is it really out of your system, or do you secretly yearn for like a cobble of creative minds that get together and just make shit for the sake of making it?
I guess what I should say is that yeah and no. It's not and it is. The part of it that's out of my system is the constructive, molded by the institution version of it.
Got it.
And the rest of it is that in that 1 year, I learned I can be the master of my destiny here. I can go and learn all of these things, and everything doesn't have to be according to a model. This was an opportunity for me to really discover something I'd been looking for 12 years of school growing up. And, I'm a young adult, and I realized, we can experiment. And the experiment doesn't have to end here. My whole life can be one big, large science experiment, one big art project. And so, entrepreneurship, looking at different ways to explore business, looking at ways to explore community building, and bringing my art to the table in a lot of different ways. That experiment never ended, and it began there. So that was kind of, get it out of the system was like, in the formal sense.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and
you didn't. It's not like you graduated from Interlaken or finished your studies at Interlaken and then said like, "Oh, I'm now convinced I need to pursue formal higher education and go to some conservatory program so I can keep doing this." Yeah.
It was
you were like, no, let me get my hobo stick.
Yep.
And start
That's right.
tramping around.
And that's what I did, Kelli. I tramped around, honestly. I had a great time there. And it really is one of the foremost, spots in the country, in the world, for people to go and explore music. And there are strict regimens, and it is a very prestigious place. And the people there, a lot of them have a lot of money, and they've been practicing for this. A lot of these folks stepped out of the womb with a cello or a violin, and there's a lot of pressure. For me, the pressure was over. It was like, last year, if I do this and I get that diploma, great. If not, I'm out of here anyway. I'm just going to have a fucking great time. And I did. And, socially as well. And that was great. Because when you're able to connect with other creative people in an environment that's free, in an environment that's supportive of that, you don't have anything to hide. You can express things together. You create bonds. You learn that you're not alone after all. And that's hard to do when you're in a rigid institution that doesn't necessarily support arts or expression. In this case, it was all about that.
That must have been thinking about like young Tarl, that super supportive, cultivating all this creativity mom. And I have, I have friends who are artist parents, and they do tend to parent a little bit different, and it's almost like a more collaborative process, shall we say, where they really see their kids, and they spend a lot of energy like introducing them to things that might be the channel that kind of light them up, or right. But I'm thinking about young Tarl then having that experience, then knowing like, oh, I'm not alone. These things that were huge challenges for me in a classroom setting up until this point in a traditional public school system, they're actually gifts. They're not deficits. Yeah. They're gifts that I possess. And to hit that environment at that age, that must have been a huge gift and pretty transformative. I mean, did you feel like, was your self-esteem already so intact that you didn't even need that? Or was it a moment of like, oh, I'm okay?
It was both, privately, what my mother knew all along was that I didn't have a community to connect with. Yeah. I didn't have a place I belonged. I was always in a group of people who weren't creative, or to the extent that I was. Yeah. And I needed to be able to connect to other people that way. What she was looking for all along, I think, was to set me up with the tools and the opportunity in the community to be able to go and do that, giving me those tools. So during Interlaken or after Interlaken, that's usually a transformative time. You're on the edge of 17, says Stevie
For
Nicks.
everyone.
Yeah, and you're about to break out. And so that's usually a place where people discover themselves and discover the next step of their journey, and that's the coming of age thing. But for me, it was especially rewarding, because I did get to discover this part of myself that said, this whole life I've had so far, I can leave it behind and take the skills with now. All along I had been trying to escape it and running away, and here I got to run away, but I got to succeed in graduating. And though all the skills that I got in that last year, which aren't the ones that people would normally see a high school education would provide you. Right. But experimentation, making up a curriculum for yourself, negotiating with adults instead of just following rules, starting to participate as a member of your life. So, yeah.
Where educators are collaborators as opposed to, right, which is when you look at education models like, the Scandinavian education model is very much that, right? Yeah. That teachers don't position themselves as in charge. They position themselves as people who possess a lot more information and more tools, but they'll collaborate with learners to offer them those resources without feeling like they have to dictate the experience.
Yeah, that is something that I was able to explore and come to terms with and understand and appreciate in that last year at Interlaken. I had a number of really great instructors, one whose name was Courtney Kaiser Sandler, and she is a fine musician in her own right. And, I really got to explore, spread my wings. And, there are a lot of great models like the ones you're talking about. And there's I think that every educator walks into their, career hopeful that they can have that kind of impact and that they can explore that. It's the institution or the system sometimes that gets a little corrupted, or it doesn't allow for people to really stretch out into it. But in this case, it was just the perfect kind of
for you.
Yeah,
right.
It was for me.
And because that experience also wouldn't be for every kid.
No, right. I mean, some people need a little bit more structure, you know.
So, okay. Then you start tramping about with the can of beans on the railroad cars. And
More than one,
I know you mentioned Duluth. So I know you land in Sturgeon Bay, and I'll come back to that in just a second. But was there one place that forever in your heart will just sort of be this magical place that you visited, that you were welcomed as a stranger in a strange land, and forever and ever that place has the keys to your heart?
It's funny because when we were just talking a little bit before this podcast, you mentioned you're from Chicago. Yeah. It was Chicago for me.
Oh, really?
It was Chicago, the big city. And, that's a little cliche, but something that I love about Chicago is that there are performing musicians out on the street. When I went to Millennium Park and the Loop, there were all sorts of folks who I would be able to run into playing music there. That was my first big break, and that was the first place that I tramped off to. So that was the beginning of the journey. I stayed there the longest. Folks at Columbia University there, took me in and said,
Columbia College.
Oh, Columbia College. Thank you.
Columbia University would want to be sure that I corrected that. Columbia College.
You.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I wasn't studying law. This was the arts. But
Columbia College is
Columbia College.
We have lots, and both my husband and I have many, many friends who came out of that program.
Yeah.
That was a place really that, and what's cool about it, and this might relate back to your kind of earlier experience, is that it really was about a working class artist as opposed to those rarefied, born with a cello in their hand kind of artists. And that is one of the things that I hope the DNA of that place never loses, and is really in line with the Chicago theater scene that I came out of. That's a working class theater, right? We work and we tell stories that are about the people who are just working schmoes, raising families, doing their best every day, right? And we do it in dumps. We put we produce the theater in any dump we can find. Yeah. And we're all 6 feet away from the audience, and there's 200 theaters doing that, right? Columbia College is a special place.
Well, thanks for correcting me on that. Columbia College, the whole time I'm Columbia, so, but that was, you're right. The working class environment, that whole time I was there were people taking me in, trying to connect with me. I was able to do that there. From the point of view of someone from Green Bay, for a lot of their young life, Chicago's the big city. So that's where I went to, just like, most people will. That's kind of the model. But that place, and I go back there from time to time, and I remember all that adventuring. So, it's a great experience for me. And, Interlaken, there were some folks there that I was able to, kind of follow there and reconnect with. What else could you say about Chicago?
You don't have to say anything else about it. It doesn't need to be a commercial for Chicago.
Yeah, that's right.
But so I think based on what you just described about the Interlaken experience and about the Steel Bridge Music Festival, I have a pretty clear sense of why then Sturgeon Bay became the place, and that, again, that community, right, that you found there. And I have to tell you, so I told you when we were walking over here that I had listened to some of your music. I might be wrong, right? So again, I'm a theater person, not a music person, but it felt the music felt very optimistic to me. Just in general, kind of made to uplift, made to unite, made to kind of this very aspirational thing that we talk about music doing.
Yeah.
So that's only, what's available digitally out there on,
Sure.
on the internet. But is that a part of how you would describe your singer-songwriter's point of view?
Yeah, and I would, positivity is something that I think people grapple onto when they've been in a place where that's very hard to find.
Yeah.
I was in that place for a long, long time, not just in my education growing up,
Yeah.
but, I'm essentially a single mother.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot we don't have to get into on this podcast, but...
Hardship.
Yeah, a lot of hardship.
Yeah.
That's right. So when you're a young person or of any age and you experience that, you are always going to gravitate toward whatever little bit of light you can. And
Is that true?
I feel, for me, it was.
Yeah,
For me, it was.
I'm not sure that is the story for everyone.
No,
but
probably not.
I think it can be a story. And I too had a lot of hardship in my younger years. And I probably have that in common with you, that was my solution, was to optimism, there's a piece of, there's a ray of light. I'll just grab onto that and see how long it will sort of drag me along.
Yeah.
But sadly, I don't think everyone has that survival mechanism, because it really is a survival mechanism.
Yeah, and where that comes from, I'm not sure. What point do you clip right or clip left? I don't know.
Right.
But that's what I clung to.
Yeah.
That was there for me. As a person, I wouldn't say that I have it in me to act out another role. I don't have it in me to perform in some sort of performative way my songs. I can't write about things that aren't genuine to me.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I don't know how to tell a story that doesn't come sincerely from some thought that I've had or some feeling that I've had. And even when I'm playing other people's music, it's hard for me if I can't connect to the song. I oftentimes won't do it.
Well, the songs that you cover that I could find, I think are, Sound of Silence, Sailing. These are like quintessential soaring, there's definitely a sadness to it, right? But also just layered with this joy and reverie, and that's quite palpable.
Taking a look at brightness and optimism, that's easy to do. But things like Sound of Silence, where, and that's my favorite Simon & Garfunkel song, and that's really one of Paul Simon's classics. But looking at deconstructing things, deconstructing the world around us, whether it's a form of criticism or shining some light on something, hopefully in a more, poetic way, that's important to me. With the working class elements we're talking about, the post-capitalist society, things that we mentioned here, those all come from going and dropping out of something traditional and starving and doing that kind of archetype, and hitting the road with the cans of beans, and but in that sort of environment, you learn what people need, and you see sometimes the worst of it, and sometimes it gets dire. And when you're in spots like that, but you've had the benefit of formal education, you start to question things. For me, those songs represent that opportunity.
Yeah.
There is Howard Zinn's "Artists in Times of War" that always really strikes me. The artist's responsibility in a time of war or any type of conflict to use their platform or their creative expression to call upon the spotlight to kind of shine some light on the issues that people are facing right now. Our big issue is poverty and is inequality and those sorts of things. I love Sounds of Silence for, because it really reflects on all of the sort of institutions that we kind of fall into, that we take for granted are there. And when we were talking earlier about the education system, that's an institution that's just there, and we were born into it, and we just follow it. If we can explore through art and have those conversations through music or through whatever, through podcasts or whatever, that art, is an essential component, then we can start to peel back the layers and try and understand how we can have those negotiations a little bit better with each other.
Well, it's interesting because, you're talking about Howard Zinn. I think, and you identified poverty as being one of our great societal challenges right now, and stemming from this disparity of wealth holding that we have that's evolved primarily due to capitalism. Yeah, but also we've got climate change. We've got, we have systemic racism. We have all of these what feel like really impossible challenges. Yeah. Like if you really sit down and just index them, it can feel like I'm not sure why I'm getting up this morning, right? Like these
you can get nihilistic real fast.
Fast. So I would say that, for me, the role of art, and I was talking just to one of my colleagues about like what people are looking to experience in a live performance experience post-pandemic. And I mean, we have the history to show it, right? They want escapism. Like that's what they want to. So it's not just, I do think we need to continue to shine the light and try to find ways to have the difficult conversations by peeling back the humanity of everyone, right? That to me is what the arts do. But then also it has the power to do this thing that's not the sound of silence. It is that sort of unifying hearts and joy and recognizing like, oh, despite these wildly disparate opinions, backgrounds, experiences, we can have a uniform experience of joy, elation, feeling moved, just by virtue of a certain chord progression,
sure.
right? Because music is like witchcraft like that. Yeah. So I think it's two-pronged, which is where the power lies, right? Yeah. Like I can trick you with my escapism, and then I can like. I'm like, for listeners who can't see this, I'm like, I'm screwing a knife or something. I don't know what I'm doing, which is I caught you. I don't know, caught you in conversation. Right?
Kelli's well known for her invisible shanks, her imaginary shanking.
It was a dialogue shank. So okay, to get to where you are now, so. What is your role at the Tarlton? What's your vision for the Tarlton? Congratulations on surviving this freaking pandemic.
Thank you.
And that's like, I do not say that lightly because venues across the country, like it was no joke. It was no joke.
How we got here is, I spent some time in Sturgeon Bay. I got out of Chicago on my big trip and I thought, what I was looking for all along in the big city was really community. Mm-hmm. And people gravitate toward big cities because there's a lot of opportunity for community. The more people, the more chance you'll find a pocket of somewhere to belong to. I think that's where that sort of came from. I was able to land in Sturgeon Bay, welcomed back to this festival I'd been a part of for years on an annual basis, and found that community there. Through that festival and through that community, the Third Avenue Playhouse, like I mentioned earlier, where local creatives could get together. It was an accessible venue. It's not too hoity-toity. Yeah. And the price points there. This is a working-class, blue-collar community on the bay. These are shipbuilders. These are shipping people, and so this was an opportunity for me to kind of soak all of that in year after year. I lived there for a number of years. When I came back to Green Bay, I knew that I had to, in the words of Cat Stevens in Father and Son, I know I have to go. Mm-hmm. And at some point you just know it's time for me to start writing my own book, and it's time for me to kind of take the reins. This was like a second opportunity. And Interlaken, Sturgeon Bay. I came back to Green Bay and I thought, what I experienced there, I'm now going to recreate somehow, some way, in whatever way is organic here. I started a festival here downtown, and every day driving by, the stars align again, and here's this old theater, and it's closed, it's boarded up. It had been, nothing that even closely resembled its historical use for a number of
Right.
years. And what it's able to do is through this festival I'd organized called the Art Tour, I hit the press, announcing all of these musicians coming into town, a lot of mostly local original acts, was able to kind of reconnect with this community through my music and my art, and put this festival together. I ended up meeting my business partner who, at this festival, who had saw me in the press and said, I'm going to make it out to this and visit this. And my business partner, Mark Mariucci, had owned the theater from 2000 to 2005. And so we were able to connect over the course of the year and really start to look at, is this a viable thing, to put this back together, to save this location,
Yep.
To reconfigure it and revitalize it. We learned a little bit later on that the city had planned for some time to purchase that site, demolish it to make room for parking in the downtown area. So although that wasn't pressing on us, we really just made it.
Yeah.
And so this space is now saved, and this was a building that was built in 1924, 1925 by a Minneapolis-based architect, Perry Crozier. This guy had designed a number of really great Art Deco theaters across the Midwest, a number of which I didn't realize, but I had played in or gone to during my hitchhiking.
Oh, wow. So actually, like when you discovered or rediscovered the space, it's like did you experience like kind of a familiarity through that experience?
There was something weird. I mean, there was something, there's a tingle there for sure.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was that or if it was the feeling of like, this is where all of this has taken me. I know this is it. But there was something there where all the stars aligned and it just felt right. And sometimes whether it's right on paper or whether it's right, upstairs, you can feel it in your chest and it just overwhelms you and you're just kind of a slave to it sometimes.
Yeah.
Just like falling in love. When you see someone, that person's face for the first time, you just know that you're trapped now.
Yeah.
And you're going to do it. And that's what this was like. So we opened in December of 2018.
Okay.
For the better part of that year, we'd been renovating it, preparing it. The space hadn't been used in a number of years. With the idea that live music would be the center of this space. Within a year and a half, the pandemic, and all of the progress and the momentum that we had built, that we had started to organize, all of that dissipated very, very quickly. We shut down for more than 6 months to be the most responsible community partner we could be. When you have a business where people conglomerate, and that's the business model, in close quarters, and the idea to profit or to make ends meet with that bottom line is to pack as many folks as possible in a single small little enclosed space. That wasn't going to make its way, for us. So we did close down. When we started back up, we thought, let's reconfigure here with something more collaborative, with something more diverse. Let's make it so that everything's affordable. Let's make it so that everything's accessible. And let's start drawing on some of the opportunities that we can pull some parts of our community in on where they don't have a space, people who are overlooked, fringe sort of events and, outlying communities who don't have a home. Because in the past, with Interlaken and with Sturgeon Bay, and now here in Green Bay with this theater, I was looking for a community.
Yeah.
I was looking for a place to belong. And so here's my opportunity in order to provide that space for other people. So that's what we started to do. The drag community, the LGBTQIA community we had in there. We've got burlesque shows in there, which don't really celebrate a lot of different, spaces in the Fox Cities area. There's not a huge platform for burlesque to exist. It requires the correct kind of space and mood that can be set in a venue. Yeah. The movies that we're able to show there on this big screen, original from 1925, it's the largest screen in the city of Green Bay, or at least in the downtown.
Yeah.
That's historical. That's been there as a cinema for a long, long time. That's something that we've been able to capitalize on. And together, we're starting to do that too. So, that's been a great experience to see a lot of those movies that were shown there sometimes originally
Yeah,
for their first,
right.
you know,
That's right.
their premiere.
That's where they would have.
Yeah.
That's where they would have screened.
So much that we can do there. The bass music community, we got raves out there. You know, maybe that's not the right word, but you know, there's a lot of great you know, environment there for people to flexibly bring in ideas of their own.
Yep.
For us to use the space in a way where we can bring young people in and older people in.
Yep.
You know, and sometimes together, but sometimes apart. The idea here is that this is an accessible space. This is the community's space, and you know, and the Tarlton Theatre. I want to represent that because I was lucky to find that.
Yeah.
So,
and there will be more information coming. Let's see. Let's say this podcast goes up in a week. Probably within 2 or 3 weeks of listening to this, about things that you and I are working on together. That I'm very excited. So we actually were all talking about this on the walkover as well. That you and I share some values around community partners, around holding space for all kinds of voices. And so we have started slowly as the Weidner, bringing our friends from the Green Bay Film Society, David Curry, his lovely curated film series over that began in January. They have another showing in February, but there's going to be a whole bunch coming down the pike at the Tarlton, collaborating with the Weidner. That's going to be, I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be exciting.
well, it's going to be so much fun. I was so thrilled about it. Yeah.
So, and it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, no, it has. I know.
Right? We've been talking about this for a year, right? A solid year. And I'm like, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, but for real, it's happening. Okay, here's my last question for you, Tarl.
Yeah.
Well, 2 last questions. One is, do you still make music? Are you still making music?
Yeah, I do.
Writing music?
I do.
All right, where are you playing it?
I'm not playing it live very often
It's
because
secret music?
because now I'm performing in different ways, you know. But I still am writing and performing it, you know, and you know, in my own space. And what I hope I can do is, in the busyness of this endeavor with the theater, and with some of my other you know, pursuits that I've got in some of my other roles, like for instance, right now I'm running for local office, you know, in order to try and push the downtown forward in a lot of the ways that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
You know, because the whole story ties together. So if you hear what I'm about and what I've been through, then it won't be hard to imagine where I'd like to take our city and where I'd like to you know, help in the political realm. But also with the Shipyard District downtown, which is you know, a new section of the downtown. I'm the director of that organization, trying to help these businesses to succeed after the pandemic, trying to pull an environment together where we can celebrate live music in all of these bars and restaurants, celebrate live local original art and music, and you know, really trying to revitalize that area, which the theater is right on the edge of.
Absolutely.
So, you know, so that's important to me. In between all of those pursuits, you know, I'm trying to you know, reconfigure you know, my initial plan for my music to be my big kind of career, and now it's a safe haven that I can retreat back into in the midst of all of the political and, you know, and business kind of BS that sometimes will haunt you. But this is you know, this is maybe 9 or 10 or 11 years going on where I've been you know, writing music, and when you are a creative person, you can't stop. I mean, you can't. It's always going to be there, whether you choose to act on it or write it down or transcribe it. You know, there's always little voices there. There's always music going on. And in a conversation with someone in a business meeting, maybe I'll have to step out. Oh, I got to go and write something down. You know, it really is for real always there, and it's always pushing me forward. I've got a song called "The Storm," and
I listened to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you?
I did.
Like a bridge over water, we're going across. All is not lost. The storm is on its way. That is a really optimistic sentiment, that it's not just something I say or sing. There is a storm on its way in each of us. And for me, that's coming about now. I feel it. The theater's time is almost here. You know, maybe this is it. Maybe it is here. And, you know, maybe we won't know until after it's passed.
Yeah, sometimes you don't know until you're like, oh, that was it.
Right. But, you know, pushing things forward, the momentum, it's so exciting. And for me, you know, being being ready for the storm, and it's coming and it's here. That's exciting. The music is always there too.
Yeah. And I think, you're raising a really great point, Tarl, that there is a lot of very strong, raw energy in our community right now amongst creatives, whether they're creative entrepreneurs, whether they're artists, that are a part of this creative economy. I hate to use these, kind of bureaucratic buzzwords, but that's how it's referred to.
Yeah, very white collar.
And it's interesting because even in my 4 years here, just efforts to try to convene us all in the same space and like looking for people to raise their hands, like, oh, you too, right? And how to do that without, because it's not about like, I like what you do and not what you do, or I think you're good and I don't think you're good. What this is about people who have a shared vision for making things, right? And so you kind of have to put all that aside. This is not about competition. This is about how do we harness all of this creative energy and put aside a lot of the nonsense that can come, it can happen in a creative community that is under-supported because people feel like they're in competition with one another. Yeah. So how do you take a creative community that's under-supported and get them all to work together? And a lot of the work that you're doing and a lot of the work that I'm doing and the Weidner doing is an attempt to do just that, to say, like, let's just put all that aside, right? It doesn't matter if what you do is unlike what they do. And it doesn't matter what your opinion is of what they do or if you feel like it should be side by side. What we have is a shared creative impulse that we want nurtured in the community.
Yeah, when you have it like you do, and like I think I do, there is, there's a drive there, and it can't be explained. But we certainly have a lot of great resources at our, disposal, and it's in our purview to use those to bring some change and bring some progress and bring people together. We're talking about the capitalist thing. That's the nature of capitalism, is competition.
Right.
And so we, while existing in that, and having our organizations exist in that, trying to kind of, swindle things in a way so that we can create a more socially, involving and open environment for people to realize that we're far more similar than we're different.
Right.
We have far more to gain together than we do separate. And when we all go up, together, we don't leave anyone behind. We all rise that way.
And to be honest, sometimes it's just a matter of like being able to tell the story effectively, right?
Yeah.
Just to tell a collective story that makes sense to people who are not creatives. Yep. Sometimes that's half the battle. And then people go, oh, I see it. Okay, yeah, sure. Like, I'd like to support that. I'd like to be a part of that. Yeah. But as I said, with another group of creative-minded and art supporters the other day, not everyone is built to build. Building is hard.
Building is very hard.
And we're very much in the midst of a period of building.
And rebuilding.
Yeah, and rebuilding, right.
Not only are we trying to rebuild from this worldwide thing that just took everyone by surprise, but, trying to also pick up the momentum that was lost there. And, there's a lot that we're going to be able to accomplish in a very quick amount of time, I think, now, because we've seen how fragile everything is. We've seen how slowly it can go. But this was a very fast thing that happened, so I think that we know what we're up against. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here in our community. And I think that we're right on the precipice. We're right on the edge. And I can't wait for it. I really can't.
Me neither. So, Tarl, is there anything you're just dying to say that you haven't said yet?
There is one final thing I just want to add. Yeah. For anyone listening, I want to say that, first of all, this has been a wonderful time. Thank you, Kelli.
Thank you for coming.
I want to say that that I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit because especially about the last 10, 15 years. What it's kind of just brought up for me is that all of these stories, they can go in somewhere positive, and we'll all fall sometimes. We'll all take a misstep, or something will happen you're not expecting. But if you continue on, what I'm reminded of in this conversation is that we can continue to push forward. You can still make something happen. And, no matter how many times you fall, you can get back up. And as long as you got something creative in you, you can make something new.
Or especially if you have something creative
That's right.
in you.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to comment on that, but I'm not going to. Let's just end with that.
Awesome.
That's a really lovely thought. You going to write a song about it?
Probably.
Okay. Do you take some notes on the walk out of here?
I've got them all upstairs.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tarl.
Thank you, Kelli.
So there you have it. That's my conversation with Tarl. And thanks for spending some time with us this week. Bird in the Wings is a production of Phoenix Studios at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. Phoenix Studios' executive producer is Ryan Martin, and the production manager is Kate Farley. Our audio production coordinator is Bill Salek. The editor for this episode is Adam Sissa. Our graphic designer is Kimberly Vlaius. Our music was written and performed by Noah Simon. If you haven't already, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platforms. You can also head over to our website at uwgb.edu/podcasts. That's plural, to check out our past episodes of this and all of the Phoenix Studio shows. I'm your host, Kelli Strickland. Thanks for listening.